What if you want to do a double knitting project, but your double knitting board is not the one used by the designer of the pattern you have in mind? It's actually pretty easy to match gauges on different looms. The loom on the left has pegs spaced 7/16 of an inch apart from center to center. The one on the right has pegs 5/8 of an inch apart. And yet I was able to make parts of the same scarf on both looms, and you cannot see where I changed. The pattern I used is mine and was originally designed for this loom, a very different configuration, but I was able to match gauge perfectly using the technique I'm about to show you. The original pattern is for a keyhole scarf. That is one that has a slot in it and the yarn tail slides through it, locking it around your neck without a knot. This time I'm making a baby blanket, which is essentially 2 scarves plus 1 center panel. Here's how I matched gauge between these 2 looms. I've been knitting on this one, the 5/8 inch one made for me by Cindy Wood. I'm going to trace the entire trip across and back that the stockinette wrap makes for a double knitting board. This could also be accomplished with a mathematical formula, but honestly, wrapping is so much simpler. So we're just going to pretend to knit an entire row of double board stockinette on this 5/8 inch loom using all the pegs that I'm using to knit the scarf. I'll mark the amount of yarn that's used. Then I'll go to the other loom and adjust the spacing between the boards so that this length of yarn makes the same trip. The gauge of the fabric is a composite based on the size of the pegs, the spacing of the pegs between one another along a board, and the spacing between the 2 boards. But all of that gets figured into the length of yarn actually used. My hope is to move over to this 7/16 inch loom. It comes with this kind of spacer, which has 3 possible dimensions to use. I'm trying the one that's my best estimate. I performed the same stockinette wrap using the same number of pegs as I'm knitting on the other loom, and you can see that I ran out of yarn a little too soon. This means my boards are a little too far apart, so let's try again. The smallest dimension on the spacer doesn't keep the boards far enough apart, so I added a stack of washers to perfect the spacing. They're so little that it's easy to keep tweaking one washer at a time until you get the perfect fit. And there it is. Using this spacing, I was able to move the scarf from one board to the next and get identical fabric. Even though I changed looms during the project, it all looks the same and you really cannot spot the point of change. I made 2 of the long scarf-like pieces, and here's the center piece, wider and being knitted using the same settings on the loom. And here's the finished baby blanket. It is the subject of its own video where I show you how to make it from start to finish. There's a link to that video for you in the program notes. Now you may wonder, why did I decide to change looms in midstream? And it is because of the cable. Both looms knit perfect, beautiful, easy to work stockinette with worsted weight yarn, which I'm using. But crossing the cables on the 5/8 inch gauge loom stressed the yarn and me and the loom more than necessary. On the loom with narrower spacing, the stitches didn't have to stretch as far to go to their new pegs. That's easier on everybody. So for this particular project, much as I love my Cindy Wood loom, the one with the narrower spacing is superior. The specs of the loom you're looking at are on my website, and I'll put a link in the notes for you. And of course, at some point, I can ask Cindy Wood to make me a 7/16 inch double board loom with all the features that I enjoy so much on this one.